Good morning, everyone. I am John Gould. I'm the Dean of the School of Social Ecology at the University of California, Irvine. I'm very pleased to welcome you all here today for the renewal of our Daybreak Dialogue series. It's wonderful to be back in person, and I'm especially appreciative that we have such a large turnout on the morning after an election, where if you are someone like myself who follows politics, you were probably up a little bit later than usual last night, watching what was happening. Plus, with the rains yesterday, we were so thankful that they ended this morning. In addition to thanking the weather gods for allowing us to have an easier opening today, I want to thank a group that we call the Changemakers in the School of Social Ecology. The Changemakers are our premier group of supporters who provide the kind of funding that allow us to do events like this. They have been an instrumental part of the school long since before I became dean, and we will have a brochure at the back that we hope you'll take on the way out that tells you a little bit more about this program, and we want to encourage you to think about potentially joining us and being able to provide programming like this. In addition, you will see on their tables flyers for an event that we're doing next Tuesday. Andrew Yang will be on campus at the Barclay Center to talk about democracy, technology, and the future. We are expecting a crowd of around 500 people. We would love for any of you or those that you know to join us at that event. And I see we have the sustaining members of Changemakers on the screen. Gives you a little sense of the kind of people who have been so instrumental to us in being able to put on these kinds of events. So the Daybreak Dialogues, which is a series that began pre-pandemic, is an opportunity for us to pair our faculty, our extraordinary faculty, with partners in the community and practitioners who work on positive change. It's an opportunity for them to come together in dialogue and in dialogue with you to showcase the work we're doing and to talk about its relevance in the community. Today, we are pleased to have as our presenters Laura Archuleta, who's president of Jamboree Housing, and she's actually CEO as well of Jamboree Housing, and Professor George Tita, who's the director of our Livable Cities Lab here at UCI. Since 1999, Laura has focused Jamboree Housing on the relentless pursuit of quality housing that people can afford. She has guided Jamboree from a small Irvine-based nonprofit with 750 homes to this. I found this shocking. And Laura, if this is true, and I suspect it is, this is unbelievable. You went from 750 homes to 7,500 homes in 75 communities. That is amazing, and my hat's off to Jamboree Housing for what you've been able to do. While she is justifiably proud of the expanding portfolio, it's the faces behind these numbers that matter the most to her, and her desire to go beyond housing and provide needed services for residents, and her vision for healthy communities has motivated Jamboree to start an in-house resident services group, one of the industry's first that fosters learning, healthy living, and community building for residents. So we are very fortunate to have Laura here with us, not only today, but more importantly, within Orange County, as Jamboree Housing provides so many needed services to those around us. Partnering with her today is George Tita, our president, not yet. George is, I understand there's an election in 2 years, George. Maybe there's a chance. George is a professor in our Department of Criminology, Law, and Society, and the director and the founding director of the Livable Cities Lab. He earned his PhD in public policy from the Heinz School of Public Policy and Management at Carnegie Mellon, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with nearly 25 years in the School of Social Ecology, meaning he joined us when he was about 10. George has also been the founding director of the school's Masters of Public Policy program. His research interests include the study of interpersonal violence with a focus on homicide, urban street gangs, and the cultural context of crime. We're pleased to welcome Laura and George today as today's Daybreak Dialogue speakers. A little bit of the how this will work this morning. We're going to invite them up here. They're going to have a little bit of a dialogue between the two of them. At some point, we will open it up to questions from all of you, and we will have you all out of here by 9 o'clock in time to get on to your next activity for the day. So without further ado, Laura and George, please come up. We're very pleased to have you both.
Great. Well, we'll have plenty of time for dialogue. I did prepare a brief presentation, just a bit about Jamboree and affordable housing in general and some of the needs. But, you know, what I find interesting in the introductions is that George and I both have a educational background that started in criminology and criminal justice. And you wouldn't think that in what I'm doing now, but it really goes to the core of looking at why do communities not work? Why do kids, my interest was really looking at why do kids turn to gangs? How do gangs flourish during that time when I was getting my education? That was something I was interested in and we saw going on in our communities. But it really trickles into housing, cities, neighborhoods, communities, families, and what I like is it's just all part of the School of Social Ecology, which I just think is awesome. I don't find many universities that I'm working with that have that all in one place. And so it's an honor for me to be a part of the Livable Cities Lab and to work with these amazing people who are doing this research and this work. So let's see if there we go. All right, so Jamboree is a 501c3 nonprofit. That just means that's our tax status. I'd say we operate fairly like a business would or should operate. We have clearly a double bottom line where we measure our impact on our mission and our vision, and along with our financials and making sure that we're a solid run company. We've grown quite a bit over the last 30 plus years. I've been there for 23 years. I was the third or fourth employee that started there, and so it's been a crazy time. We're up to about 140 employees. I think what is really important about Jamboree is our mission. We spent a lot of time working on this, and the words matter. So we've got words like deliver, which is an action word. Jamboree delivers high quality, affordable housing and services that transform lives and strengthen communities. And it's important that the strengthen communities is in there because we're not just about building boxes and dropping them in. We're about strengthening overall communities. And of course, our vision is that every person will live in a strong, healthy, sustainable community. And that means we work with all kinds of partners out in the community to make that happen, because we're not doing the healthcare, we're not doing the education, and some of these other parts that go along with this vision. We are statewide. We have our corporate office here in Irvine, and we have an office in Sacramento that's going like crazy up there. Lots of need for affordable housing. We've talked over the years about going outside of California, but you know what? California has a lot of need, and you all know that. That's why you're here, and so it keeps us pretty busy. So at this point, over 20,000 residents live in a Jamboree property. We have 800 plus veterans. We have the largest veterans-only exclusive property in Santa Ana called Heroes Landing that we opened a couple years ago, and we have 3,600 seniors. So we do have senior-specific housing, but of course, when we build what we call kind of a family housing development, seniors can live in there also. We have gotten more active in the special needs area over the last 10 years, where we're specifically building housing for folks who are coming directly off the streets from homelessness to live in housing and get the services that they need there. We believe that you cannot adequately help somebody who's experiencing homelessness while they're on the street. You need to get them off the street and into housing. So what is affordable housing, right? It costs no more than 30% of the monthly household income. So that gives you an idea when we talk about what is affordable housing. I was just having this conversation with my aunt because she was trying to decide should she move into a different senior apartment and whatnot. A lot of people are paying way more than 30% right now. You know, even at 50%, you're probably doing okay. But it's when you get up way above that that you get into trouble. Here's a few of our properties here that we show here. How we develop our affordable housing is through the primarily the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a federal tax credit that is offered to corporations. And so it really is a coming together of a developer and a company that needs a tax write-off. They buy the credits, and then we use that as our equity to build our projects. They get a tax credit for 10 years against the taxes they owe. So it's a very popular program throughout the country. It's very competitive. So those of you that might be developing in market rate or dabble in market rate or own some rental properties, it's very different in the affordable arena because we put together our developments and then we have to go out and compete for this financing. And the rules for that competition change every year based on where the state treasurer's focus is or the governor's focus. And so these types of elections like we just had are really important, right? We may have a whole pipeline. We right now at Jamboree have $1 billion worth of development in our pipeline. And so we're having to watch every city that we have land tied up in, we're spending money and see, did the council shift? Did that 3-2 shift? Where are we at? And then look up to Sacramento also and see, okay, who's in place in Sacramento now? That where's the legislation going? How is it gonna change things? So it's a fun, exciting industry, and that's probably why I've been at it for so long. Prior to working at Jamboree, I worked in city government for about 12 years. So it's been well over 30 years that I've been doing this business, but it's a great profession. I would encourage you, if anyone's thinking about a change in profession, to look at it. And if you have young ones that you're mentoring or parenting or grandkids, affordable housing is a wonderful profession to go into, and it's growing as its own kind of professionalized area. So I would say, why the cost study? How did we get to what we're talking about today? And it really was about the need, right? We have $3.4 million in low-income renters in California. And even before the pandemic, we were way short of housing units. So you can see some of the statistics here, but I would just say, the pandemic for us, it helped in some ways draw a focus attention on the housing needs, and the importance that a secure housing unit plays, even if it's just a tiny home or a small unit, that people could be safe and off of the streets and have their space. It really propelled Jamboree into a whole new area where we were doing 2 to 3 projects a year to doing 10 to 12 a year now at this point. And that's everything from new construction of apartments to acquisition of apartments to acquisition of motels, and taking older motels off of the motel sheet and bringing them into housing, renovating them, and putting either folks who are coming off of the street experiencing homelessness or expanding units into family housing. And so we've been really, really active since the pandemic started. So the regional housing needs assessments, that's how cities determine what their housing needs are going to be going forward. You can see some of the projections here for Orange County and the state official housing goal. The big thing for Orange County, you see the needs, a total of 183,000. I would just say housing is needed at all income levels, and I've been talking a bit about it. Hasn't quite caught on, so I'll throw it out there and see if you guys can visualize this. I'm looking at it as like a freeway, right? Traffic on the freeway, that you need to have housing at all income levels to keep the flow, right? That people can get on, they can get into a housing unit when they're ready to change lanes and to get into something else, that it's available. When you're a senior and your house is too big for you, you can sell your house, and that there's policies that support you in that sale, and then you move into senior housing, and then it frees up that house. So it's all about, for me, it's all about keeping the flow. It's making housing available to people at all income levels. At Jamboree, what we do is we focus on the low income, the very low income, and that what we call the extremely low income, so people making 30% of the area median income and below. So again, housing needs, California still isn't building enough housing. You can see here single family and multifamily. We really weren't hitting the targets still, except for back in '04 and '05, and see where we're at now. And I have Marissa with me who put together this information from Jamboree. So if you have any questions on research, she does all this research and pulls it in for me to talk about. So challenges to production. Why aren't we building more? You all hear about it, you know it, you're out there in the community, but we have our regulatory constraints. We have, of course, NIMBYism and folks against housing, lack of political will. We do face labor shortages from time to time, and we can't get subs. We do have an in-house general contractor at Jamboree, so we go out then to subs, excuse me, to build the projects, and we do find labor shortages, increased construction costs, land costs, and funding sources. But I would say this housing issue boils down to two things. It boils down to political will and money. And really then the money really boils down to political will. And that's what it's all about. I mean, people talk about homelessness and how do we solve homelessness. You cannot solve homelessness without building housing. That's the bottom line. And there's all kinds of other things that our folks who face challenges need, but they need housing. They need some sort of housing. And the shelters are a gap stop, but when you have limited resources, it really needs to be focused on housing production. So that's how we kind of got where we are. We had this problem, and then you look at having an institution like UCI here and someone like George Tita available with the Livable Cities Lab to take a look at what are some of the pushbacks from the NIMBYs and why isn't housing getting produced. And it was a perfect coming together of the practitioners out in the community and the smarties at UC Irvine to be able to come together and do this research and then present it. And what's nice about it is it's not me up there, going on and on about how it's good for the community without any data. It's actually UC Irvine going out there in the Livable Cities Lab, showing the data, showing what they found when they actually brought in the PhDs and took a look at it. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to George for his presentation.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you all again for being here this morning. And Laura, beautiful segue into what I'm going to talk about. And in terms of these impediments to developing housing, we were approached by Laura and her colleagues at Jamboree, along with other community organizations and developers, both in the nonprofit and profit area, to examine one issue related to the NIMBYism in the area. Before I jump right into our research, let me just step back and tell you a little bit about the Livable Cities Lab. And again, our idea is to, what's the technical word? The smarties. We want to get all the smarties at UCI to put their brain power behind taxing problems in a couple of areas. And it's really, we're really focused right now on public safety. I'm working with a colleague in my department, Amanda Geller, to look at the critical community response teams that are being deployed in the city of Anaheim as a way of addressing people who are experiencing homelessness or behavioral addiction issues that isn't simply let's put another check mark on his or her record and add to the misery through a fine or jail, but let's see if we can't get people into the services that will actually help them succeed in life. My background really is in gun violence and studying homicide, and so I'm working to pull together a team that will look at patterns of firearm usage over the last decade throughout the United States. And the reason why I'm here, our first real meaty piece of research that we have produced is looking at the impact of affordable housing on crime and property values, two of the common ideas that are brought up in the NIMBY world of why why people oppose the development of this sort of housing in their neighborhood. These are the other smarties that did all of the work on this, Professor John Hipp, Emily Owens, and a couple of great research assistants, Clarissa Iliff and Seth Williams. Our question that we were approached to address is really rather simple. When you cite and open affordable housing, how does it impact the value of other existing housing in that neighborhood? How does it impact crime in that neighborhood? And so we have two very simple questions that we're going to look at here. Laura has already told you what affordable housing is, and we included all of that in our study. We did not include emergency shelters. And what we were able to do at the end of the day was to map out about 370 properties in Orange County that qualify as affordable. And this is a map of, this is a distribution of those areas in Orange County. And I kind of actually prefer, our graduate student Clarissa made a really nice map that shows the kind of the dot density of this, a heat map. We call these hotspot maps in crime to show concentrations. And so what this does is it just verifies what I think a lot of people already know. And yes, it's spread throughout the county, but there are certainly a number of communities, cities in Orange County that are carrying more than, shall we say, their fair share of affordable housing in Orange County. And that, this is our first piece of evidence that maybe we need to decentralize the locations of affordable housing and have it a more even distribution throughout the county. I'm not going to spend much time on this. This is not causal. This is just the reality. Looking at, I think it was 2015 estimates of socioeconomic, demographic composition of places, that we find that on average that the places with affordable housing are a little lower on the income level. The houses are generally a little bit less valued or lower. What am I trying to say? The home values are a little bit lower in these communities. Again, not causal. We're just saying what do the places where we find affordable housing look like. But now let's kind of cut to the meat of this, right? Let's see what happens. What is the impact on housing prices? And really, we can sum it up pretty well with just this simple graph right here. And what we've done very carefully, what my colleagues have done is we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So we residualized the prices, meaning that we took out the low lows of 2008 and the high highs of 2019, right? And we adjusted everything to 2010 dollars to control for inflation, okay? So you can have confidence in our analysis that when we say we're comparing the 3 years before the housing is open to the 3 years after, it's the measurement of housing values has been corrected for any of those other issues, when we had the economic downturn or the big spike up. And so what do we find? We find, I don't have a pointer, but that very close to affordable housing, within 0.2 miles, we see a $15,000, almost $16,000 increase in the value of home sales, value of homes in the 3 years after the affordable housing. And this continues out. It gets less as we move away. But now let's kind of look a little bit more specifically. So this is the housing related, this is home values before the development will be this first line that I show you. And then if we look after the development, we see that the price of the houses have increased. We looked not only at the value of the overall house, but we looked at square footage as well. And what do we find? We find the very same story, that the value per square foot has gone up as well in the 3 years afterwards. We also had some concern, well, maybe there's a very different impact in the very affluent neighborhoods versus the less affluent neighborhoods. So we looked at higher income versus lower income places by looking at poverty rates. So here we have in high poverty neighborhoods, once again, our line is above our starting point, so we see an increase in home values. Here is the price per square foot in those higher poverty neighborhoods. Once again, we see a positive impact after opening affordable housing. Now, what do we find in low housing value or low income, low poverty, more affordable neighborhoods? Once again, except for this little bit of area down here, which I'm going to address in a moment, where we do see a negative impact on housing values, it's overall, it's above the line, okay? Now, this might be a concern. Hey, wait a minute, you said that this is good for the neighborhood, and here I am in a more affluent neighborhood, and if I live very close, you're telling me my home values are gonna go down. Well, let's take a look at something else. Let's look at the square footage. Big increase in the value of home square footage. So all this suggests to us is that for whatever reason in our data set, we had some incredibly large homes that sold for high values in some of those 3-year periods versus the 3-year after the opening of affordable housing. But again, because the actual value per square foot is higher in all of those cases. So our summary for that part of the research is that the data simply doesn't support the concern that affordable housing is going to destroy your communities and your value and in your property that you own. The homes that are located the closest to the opening of affordable housing have the largest gains in value, and we find a very similar effect in the highest and lowest poverty neighborhoods. So now we change our focus to crime. Put in affordable housing, you're going to drive up crime, right? And we look at the kind of crimes that we're most concerned about: aggravated assault, robbery, burglary, motor theft from vehicle. We look, just as we did with the housing values, we'll look at overall, and then we could look by higher and lower poverty income. And just let me give you a couple of the highlights here. Here is, now we're looking over the first mile bands around the actual address of the affordable housing development. This is what our crime looks like as we move away from of those locations before housing is built. Here's what it looks like afterwards. below, at worst, the same. Robberies per unit in the pre-area, robberies afterwards, below, once again. How about burglary? Below. I could bore you for another 5 minutes with these sorts of slides for all the different kinds of neighborhoods, but so I'm not going to. But let me show you one that we might want to be concerned about, and that's motor vehicle thefts. Okay, so here is our before. Here's our after. Whoa, look at that. It's above. So once we open affordable housing, motor vehicle thefts actually go up, right? Yeah, well, let's be really, really careful on that, because it's not just that it's statistically significant. You have to look at the magnitude of the effect, okay? The effect size is 0.1 more crimes per year. I've never heard anybody complain about, oh my God, then 10 years before versus the 10 years after, there was one more car stolen in this very small area, right? So it's really a negligible impact. And that's, to be honest, that's the same for the positive impacts as well. That they're positive, and we're seeing crime go down, but the magnitude of that is very small, and part of that is because we're looking at very small areas as well. So what are our conclusions? That affordable housing is good for the neighborhood in terms of increasing the values of the existing properties, and from a crime and safety standpoint, affordable housing has no measurable negative impacts on crime. And I would like to also thank all of our funders, of course, who supported this research. I won't read their names, you can see them all. And we have on our homepage, you can download the executive summary of this, visit more about the Livable Cities Lab, how you can give us money and all the important things and so forth. But thank you all for your attention.
Do we have any questions? In the back?
Thank you both. Okay, great for that excellent presentation. I just am insanely curious when you showed the map of where the placement of the affordable housing, it looked like a number of those affordable housing units were right on the water, where, places like maybe where the Montage Hotel is. And I'm wondering why affordable housing would be put there in that exceedingly expensive, presumably, geography.
I don't want to, there were a couple of census tracts that I had concern about and said this has to be incorrect, Clarissa. Let's go back and double, triple check those. I don't know about South County, but I do know that their community development partners did the veterans housing right along like near the Mariners Mile in Newport Coast, right? So there are. It was a motel, I believe, that they converted in that case. Let's not forget one other thing, and it's my punchline. Irvine, where we're sitting right now, I think we're still in Irvine here, are we not? Is really kind of the poster child for affordable housing, because nowhere in Orange County are there more affordable housing units than there are in the city of Irvine. And Irvine has been voted and recognized as the safest city in America for 16 straight years. So I think, being from more the East Coast and studying poverty and social theories of crime, we think of New York and Chicago and dense high-rise and people crushed together. That's just not the reality of affordable housing, what it looks like, where it's sited in places like California.
I would just add, we do have a development a couple blocks from the beach in Laguna Beach. We have our project in San Clemente that is a couple miles inland from the beach. We have a development breaking ground this year in San Juan Capistrano. So development's starting to take place or has taken place in South Orange County along the beach. I guess my question would be are you wondering why build it in high cost areas, or because it is costly. Those the units in San Juan Capistrano are going to be about $750,000 a door. That's a lot of money for an apartment unit to be built. The land is extraordinarily expensive. So then you get into that bigger philosophy discussion, right, of should we be building affordable housing in each community and meeting those needs, or should we bringing those needs to another community and having them build them there? That's right, a whole other discussion about it. But it is taking place, and the regional housing needs assessment done by city. And so those cities are responsible for siting that housing. And as of right now, it's very difficult to site it in another city and get credit for it. You can do it sometimes in unincorporated and do some arrangements, but yeah, so hopefully that answers it. Yeah.
I wonder, thank you. I wonder how the data will hold up or how applicable it will be in the future, where California now requires, with the affirmatively furthering for housing rules, that that affordable housing should not be concentrated in high poverty areas, but spread throughout the community. And so if you're talking about richer neighborhoods, did your study, were there many examples of richer neighborhoods that had affordable housing in it or close by? Or were the existing developments all more concentrated in high poverty areas?
So from our study and from the maps, you can see, and from Irvine, that it's not all concentrated in Santa Ana, Anaheim, parts of Garden Grove, Westminster, and so forth, that there is a distribution throughout. And we found really that in some of the higher income neighborhoods that the positive impact of affordable housing was actually greater than in the less affluent neighborhoods. So I feel confident, and we are digging deeper into this. We have a graduate student that's doing her second year PhD project on this very question, and breaking it out by city and looking at that. I don't have the final analysis there, but we're finding that the findings are robust so far.
And if I could add to that just briefly, so what I like about the outcomes of this study is that they're in line with every other study that's been done across the country. Why did we have to do it? Well, of course we had to do it because Orange County's special, right? We all know that. And folks aren't going to believe it if it's done someplace else. It's like when we did, and UCI, Dr. Snow did the cost of homelessness study. And we rolled that out, and I would take it to the statewide events, and Northern California is going, yeah, we looked at this years ago. Well, okay, but we just did it here in Orange County. So I like that part of it. The other interesting thing is we definitely find in what we call high resource areas, which you might consider your wealthier areas, better school districts and whatnot, we do find that the spin-off benefits to the kids growing up there, the other impacts that come along with that deconcentration of poverty are huge, right? And if you measure those over time, your dollars going into those developments go further from that standpoint. On the flip side, if you do affordable housing development in blighted communities, the spin-off benefit of that development is that you see people start to their properties, you see the overall area getting better, crime rates going down because of the infusion of in those blighted neighborhoods. And so you kind of have to pick and choose where you want your outcomes to be, right?
The number that you gave of 750,000 per door in San Juan Capistrano is eye-popping. I think that's one where, didn't you have the land donated by the city? And does that 750,000 include the cost of the land? Related question is, land costs aside, how much does it cost to build a 2-bedroom unit on 30 units to the acre kind of scenario?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So on the San Juan Capistrano project, we're actually buying the land, but then they are giving us a separate loan so that it does include the cost of the land in that. And we had several appraisals because our board at Jamboree was very concerned about was that truly. But what does it cost without land costs to build properties? I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, and I should know. The other thing is we do prevailing wage and non-prevailing wage projects, and that does impact things. But I'm happy to, shoot me an email, you know where to find me, and I can send you kind of our latest numbers on our developments.
Thank you. Well, I have two separate questions, but the first one is probably pretty easy, and that is, well, I actually am an adjuster, and I handle, well, I retired, but I handle construction defect litigation. So, it's very interesting to see the way construction defect litigation affects the building of projects. But what I'm wondering is, you mentioned that parties can purchase credits. I'm just wondering, are any of the big developers in Orange County, are they involved at all with Jamboree or?
Yeah, so when we develop in Irvine, the Irvine company, actually Donald Bren purchases the low-income housing tax credits himself.
Okay.
So it's a nice pair. We have offered that to Shea Homes and to other master developers who want to, but for the most time, they're coming in and they're building out their development and moving on, so they're not looking to buy those credits.
Lion,
yeah. So we have not
KB
sold
Home.
them to anyone else.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'll tell you separately why it's good to know about Irvine, but the Irvine company. But if I may ask my other question, which is, basically you've been talking about the perception of building affordable housing versus what appears to be the science in terms of what it does for the neighborhood, housing prices. So I realize this is simplistic, but how do you start convincing people that the science trumps, excuse that word,
Careful, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not the word to use there.
prevails?
Prevails, yeah. We are the school of science driving solutions. If the best we can do is what we're trying to do now, and that is anybody who's willing to listen to the Livable Cities Lab, I will come out and I will speak to them. It's very important that we meet with the community and share this. It doesn't matter to some people. They're gonna they know, right? This may work for Orange County and overall, but my street's different, right? You're always going to go back down, and my experience is going to be different, or they'll draw upon singular anecdotes, and as we know, the plural of anecdote is not evidence. So I can carry this message home to as many people. Convincing, I think. I'm not a psychologist. I'll give that to Professor Loftus back there. How do we convince people, Elizabeth, to believe the science?
Good one.
I don't know if I have the answer to that one, George.
I think I have part of the answer to that, and I guess I can give a plug to actually a couple people sitting to my left here, right? I've been doing housing advocacy for over 30 years, and I used to want to change the minds of all of the not in my backyard people. I've abandoned that effort. I do not think that in my experience, hardcore NIMBYs, right? You're not going to build anything ever here. There's also the bananas, build absolutely nothing near anything, anytime, anywhere, right? So they're pretty set in their ways, and data's probably not going to change their mind. Interactions with you one-on-one as their neighbor, as someone who lives in their community, might change their mind. But I think what is going to work, going back to what Laura said about political will, the bottom line is you got 34 cities in Orange County, everyone with a governing body that approves these developments, right? And so, Kathy's in Costa Mesa. She's got to develop a group of people that can combat the NIMBYs in Costa Mesa. And this information can work if Kathy's able to share it with her elected representatives in Costa Mesa. It gives them the cover to be able to cast the courageous votes to approve the housing when it comes before them. So I think banding together in groups, city by city, that's what works. And the plug I would give is if you want to find a group to plug into, contact one of these two. They can help you in South Orange County and Costa Mesa. Contact me. I can help you here in Irvine. But go to the United End Homelessness website, and the Housing Champions Advocacy Network is actually building out a city-by-city, citizen-led advocacy network. So that's really, I think, what will work. I think trying to change NIMBYs' minds, that's a bridge too far. Gathering with like-minded people, and we know they're out there, right? And locking arms together, I think that's the way you change the minds of the elected officials who actually cast the votes.
I think one of the elephants in the room here is that there's a range of among unhoused people, and at one end, and you have about a third who are mentally ill or drug addicts. And then you have one third who are quite functional and just economically homeless, and then probably have a shady in between. And what I would say with the 1/3, is that they need shall we say something like a psychiatric hospital or something where they house you all right, but they don't let you out on the street, and if I had a place close to me where such people were, but I knew they weren't going to let them out and poop on the street, and say expose themselves to whatever they do and the crazy stuff, I would not be so disturbed.
I would just say that I think for the third that you're talking about of folks who are suffering from chronic mental illness and addiction, they cannot be treated on the street, you're right. So we have to get them in somewhere. And we do have housing developments where there's 24-hour care, and there's someone there if their medication needs to be adjusted. We don't have lockdown per se housing, but I think there's a lot of that 1/3 that can be really treated once they're off of the street in a secure, safe housing unit with a services provider on site that they trust. And then for those that really need hospitalization and care, there needs to be those resources for them for sure. The one thing I said when the Orange County ACCOC, the Association of Orange County Cities, came out with the 2,700 units needed to house the folks who are homeless right now on the street, experiencing homelessness, is that half of those folks were just economically homeless. Well, you know what? Let's solve that. Let's solve that issue. And then we start to really help, while we're helping others. But we're not even doing that. We're not even just helping economically. And when you look at numbers about how many people get housed every day from homelessness and how many people fall into homelessness, we're on a bike. We're not making any progress. We're staying still. So one of the initiatives we have at Jamboree for this next year is what we are calling the Homeless Prevention Production Program, because we need a new acronym, HPPP, and it's about production of extremely low-income housing. That's all it is. How do you prevent homelessness? You produce extremely low. And then you put wraparound services for those folks who fell into homelessness and then became an addict while they were on the street because they had to survive on the street, and that was the only way they could survive there. So you're right, though. There's a full range of folks that need assistance, and there's got to be different tools to address those needs.
Hi, I have a question regarding the decrease in the crime rate. What were the factors? Was it increased lighting, police presence, or simply cultural factors of people who moved in, or maybe the people who were in the rental office, or whatever other factors that have been studied or whether they have not been studied?
Yeah, you raise a really, really interesting question. And so, I like to think of the simplest explanation of crime is the routine activities. A crime occurs when you have the intersection in space and time of a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the apps minus a capable guardian. So it's just a simple math problem. And we can think about how the development and siting of affordable housing changes each one of those in terms of changing the composition of the people that live in the neighborhood. If Laura comes in and redevelops a motel, okay, you may possibly see a change in sex crimes or drug trafficking or something like that in the neighborhood because you've changed the composition. Or you've come in and you've taken some properties that were blighted and you now, again, I dare you to drive down the street of Santa Ana past many of these affordable housing units and say, oh, well, that's clearly affordable housing. I only repeat this because it makes me shake my head. I was on one community meeting and somebody said, my wife said those people over there, they look like us. They look like regular people that live in that affordable. I didn't even know it was affordable. They look normal. It's like, oh But, so, we changed the blight in the neighborhood. We changed the lighting. And when you invest in a community, generally that also increases the attention and the investment by local officials, so you may get more patrol of police in the area. But have we done sort of a case-by-case study? No, we have not. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it is. And I would say, like, for those projects where we're going into a blighted area or a motel conversion, because they are so expensive, to be able to say to your city partners, your county partners in the state, that this investment also has the spin-off benefit of reducing crime, because calls for service are expensive. That it's a big part of the city's budget. So I think it is important, and I think that there's a lot, this kind of shifts into, there's a lot of opportunities for the city's lab to move forward and do this additional research. That's part of the reason that hopefully we get out and we let people know that the Livable Cities Lab is here. It does take an investment of money to get there, but like those that invested in this study, there's some really good benefits that come along with it. So it's hard to determine on the new construction side. There's the crime prevention through environmental design. There's the CEPTED guidelines that we implement. But oftentimes cities will say, well, can you put eyes on the street? Can you put the stoops? And it works. And being able to measure that is really important. I've talked about the good work that Jamboree and others do in the affordable housing area, how we're changing lives, we're saving lives, we're improving communities. But I found that until you measure it and you have someone else be able to show it, people don't often believe it. But, the perception is really important, as George was talking about, people not being able to tell what's affordable and what's not, and what's not affordable. It's extremely important. And then everything is personal, to the comment from the gentleman in the back about I'd support something if it was safe around me. I tell you a story in Anaheim, our very first development for folks coming from the street with chronic mental illness. There was a man who stood up at one of our early community meetings, and he said, I live right down the street from this development. I can't support it. We had a man break into our house. I found him sitting in our living room naked. My wife and my kids came out. We found him there. He was in a terrible mental state. We had to call the police. How can I support this development? Well, we walked down the path with him to show him if we had built that property, and when we built, and we ultimately did build the development, he ultimately supported it because we had a local preference working with the city of Anaheim to make sure that we were taking people into that development who were already connected to and living in Anaheim. And so it's a scary process. It's very local, and it takes a lot of work. But anyways, I got a little off track there. But we're doing so. There's some good things that can be done, I guess I'd say.
And as we think about good things that can be done, the partnership between Jamboree and the Livable Cities Lab is absolutely one of those things. Laura, I would thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate the fact that you have now given us the new title of Smarties. I will take that back and use that with all of our faculty and staff and students today. I think the greatest compliment that we can give in return is that people like you are doers and leaders, and we are delighted to be in partnership with you and folks like you. One thing I would point out that really underscores all of this is the University of California, Irvine recently did a poll of residents in Orange County asking the question, what are the top 10 issues that are of concern to you? Anyone want to guess what issue number one was? It was affordable housing. Number 2 was transportation. Number 3 was overdevelopment. Number 4 was crime. Well, the conversation that we've just witnessed this morning between Laura and George, and between the two of them and you, is about all of those issues. So we very much appreciate your participation today in Daybreak Dialogues, but we also appreciate your attention to these issues and your engagement with the School of Social Ecology. We are committed to building that connection between research and policy and practice. When we talk about science-driving solutions, we are talking about academe being relevant. And that is really what our school is about, and that is what the Daybreak Dialogues series is about. So we welcome you to come back for more of them in 2023. We hope that we will see you next Tuesday at the event with Andrew Yang. We also hope that you will consider joining our Changemakers group that helps to support activities like these and other things in the school. But most importantly, right now, I would like to thank you for coming, and I hope you'll join me in thanking Laura and George for such a stimulating conversation.